No one expected this, not even her most vocal critics. Blake Lively just suffered the most humiliating defeat of her entire legal campaign in the courtroom. Shockwaves will haunt her legacy forever because the case she built with calculated precision against Jed Wallace has just been thrown out, dismissed completely with prejudice, and what the judge revealed in open court has shattered her credibility in ways no PR team can ever repair. The courtroom was packed, tension thick, every camera pointed at Blake Lively as she entered dressed in all black, face unreadable, jaw set like steel, but behind the facade the reality was spiraling. The case against Jed Wallace, once hyped as her boldest legal stand, had completely collapsed. The judge had reviewed months of filings, testimony, expert statements, timelines, and digital records, and in a stunning reversal, he ruled not only in favor of Wallace but accused Lively's team of misleading the court through redacted evidence and manipulated timelines. The ruling was brutal, every paragraph sliced through the false narrative. Her lawyers had carefully spun. The central claim that Wallace orchestrated a harassment campaign was deemed unsupported by fact, uncorroborated by evidence, and contradicted by their own witnesses. As the judgment was read aloud, Blake remained frozen, expressionless, while her team frantically passed notes behind her, but it was too late. Wallace had won without even having to speak. His truth was in the receipts, and the receipts were undeniable. The judge added that several of Lively's filings bordered on procedural abuse, warning that her team may face sanctions for conduct unbecoming of officers of the court. Outside the courthouse, the reaction was immediate. The press, once timid, now turned aggressive. Headlines screamed humiliation, disgrace, legal disaster. Fans turned skeptics, poured online, sharing clips of old interviews and dissecting how the public had been manipulated for months into believing Jed was the villain when in truth he had been the victim of a carefully orchestrated smear campaign. And it didn't stop there. Sources close to Wallace confirmed he is now pursuing legal action of his own, including defamation and emotional distress suits that could cost Lively millions. More than just money, she was losing control of the narrative, and fast brands that once sponsored her quietly pulled back deals. Vanished posts were deleted. Even longtime allies began issuing vague statements of disappointment or silence. Blake Lively's courtroom confidence had been crushed. The judge didn't just dismiss the case, he dismantled it, exposed it, and ensured there was no way to resurrect it. This wasn't just a legal loss, it was a total collapse, a defeat so public, so undeniable, it may mark the end of her influence in the courtroom and beyond. And as the doors of the courthouse slammed shut behind her, one thing became clear. Her attempt to destroy Jed Wallace had backfired, and in trying to ruin his name, she may have ruined her own forever. Inside sources have now revealed that the internal reaction within Blake Lively's legal team was nothing short of absolute chaos. As the judge read the final ruling, attorneys were seen exchanging panicked glances, whispering behind legal pads, and furiously checking their phones for instructions from the upper chain. It became immediately clear that they had not prepared for a complete dismissal, let alone one with prejudice, which legally bars Blake from ever filing the same claim again. According to multiple observers, the moment the gavel fell, one of her lead counsels left the courtroom without a word, followed minutes later by another member of the team who was visibly distressed. What no one expected was what happened shortly after in a private hallway closed to press but accessible to legal observers. A heated argument reportedly broke out between Blake's head counsel and a senior advisor from her crisis PR team. Voices were raised, accusations of negligence and bad strategy filled the air. One witness claimed they heard the words, "You guaranteed this wouldn't happen," followed by a string of expletives. This wasn't just a legal failure, it was an internal implosion, and the fallout was only beginning. Outside the courthouse, Blake was nowhere to be seen, rushed through a side exit and into a black SUV that peeled away without stopping for comment. Her absence only fueled the fire online, where fans and critics alike began speculating about the full scope of what this defeat meant for her future, not just in court but in Hollywood, because this ruling didn't just hurt her legally, it struck at the core of her brand. The composed, unshakable, powerful woman narrative was now replaced with one of desperation, loss, and exposure. Major entertainment outlets began pulling out archived footage, interviews, and statements, highlighting inconsistencies that were once overlooked or ignored, and as those clips resurfaced, so did voices from her past, former collaborators, assistants, and even alleged victims of behind-the-scenes manipulation who now felt empowered to speak out without fear of being buried under her influence. What once would have been silenced instantly was now going viral, building a wave of doubt around everything she had said or done in recent years. It was no longer about this single lawsuit, it was about a pattern, a larger story beginning to take shape, a story in which Blake Lively may have spent years constructing a pristine image at the expense of those around her, and now with the truth beginning to bleed through every crack in her once flawless facade, the public wanted more. They wanted answers, they wanted accountability, and above all they wanted justice, and it was now clear that this was just the beginning of the unraveling that, as the smoke from the courtroom disaster continued to spread, deeper cracks began to show within Blake Lively's carefully guarded world, because while the public had only just begun to absorb the stunning dismissal of her case against Jed Wallace, those closest to her were already preparing for something far worse. Insiders now confirmed that multiple members of her extended legal advisory team have either resigned quietly or gone dark, refusing to take calls or issue statements. Some have even started cooperating with legal observers off the record, providing details about internal conflicts, ignored warnings, and documentation that may suggest Blake was not only aware her case was weak, but may have pushed forward. Despite knowing the risks, according to one insider, she was obsessed with control. She believed if she controlled the narrative, she could control the outcome, and that belief may have driven her to override legal advice and force the lawsuit forward anyway. What makes this revelation even more damaging is that documents have now leaked suggesting her team withheld critical context from the court, including full versions of email chains that would have undermined her claims, and these omissions are now at the center of an early review by the state's Bar Association, because if it's proven that her attorneys knowingly submitted altered evidence, they could be facing disciplinary action and disbarment proceedings, and if it's proven that Blake directed any part of that strategy, the consequences for her could extend well beyond the courtroom into criminal territory. Financial analysts are also now reviewing her sponsorship and brand contracts with several major companies, who have clauses that allow them to immediately sever deals in the event of a public ethics breach, and word is those terminations have already begun. Behind the scenes, with executives scrubbing future campaigns that featured her image, legal commentators are calling this a textbook example of how celebrity power can backfire when wielded without caution or truth, and fans are watching in disbelief as someone they once idolized is being exposed not just as a flawed figure, but as a calculated manipulator. The tide is turning fast, with social media now flooded by clips, memes, and commentary, breaking down the entire timeline from the moment she filed to the moment the judge shut it all down, and through it all Jed Wallace has remained mostly silent, choosing to let the courts speak for him. But sources say he's been quietly documenting everything, every interaction, every article, every falsehood published under her influence, and his team is now preparing to go on the offensive, seeking damages that could stretch into the millions and open the door to further investigations, including digital defamation, online harassment, and possible witness intimidation. What started as a single dismissed case is spiraling into a legal avalanche that threatens to bury everything Blake Lively built, and the worst part for her is that she can't stop it. Now the cameras are still rolling, the documents are still leaking, and the court of public opinion is no longer in her favor. The silence from Blake Lively's camp has now become deafening, and that silence is speaking louder than any press release ever could, because as legal reporters dig deeper into the wreckage left behind by the collapsed case against Jed Wallace, they are uncovering a pattern of behind-the-scenes manipulation that suggests this lawsuit was never about justice. It was about revenge, public control, and the silencing of a man who knew too much. Court clerks have now confirmed that several discovery documents never made it to the docket at all, raising questions about what else her team might have tried to suppress or omit. And a new whistleblower who once worked closely with her legal strategist has stepped forward, anonymously stating that Blake personally reviewed media strategy documents and selected which narratives would be leaked to press contacts in an effort to destroy Jed Wallace's reputation. Before the case even began, the source claimed she referred to the lawsuit as a distraction play and wanted the headlines to overwhelm his side before he can mount a defense. This revelation has prompted legal ethics boards to begin informal inquiries into her team's conduct, and while nothing official has been announced yet, the pressure is mounting fast. Meanwhile, Jed Wallace's legal team is wasting no time moving forward with a civil countersuit that includes defamation, emotional damages, and malicious prosecution, with a preliminary hearing expected to take place within weeks. And according to those familiar with the new case, Wallace has obtained access to a treasure trove of communications between publicists, journalists, and former associates that detail how Blake's side coordinated online attacks curated smear campaigns, and even tried to plant stories that would discredit potential witnesses. What started as a war of legal briefs is now evolving into a battle over truth, narrative, and accountability, and this time Blake Lively is not in control of the script. Social media sentiment has flipped almost completely. Her name trending daily for all the wrong reasons. Petitions are now circulating demanding that brands drop her and streaming platforms pause upcoming projects until a full investigation is completed. What was once a fan base has transformed into a reckoning demanding transparency and consequence, because this isn't just about a lawsuit anymore. It's about trust, integrity, and the danger of unchecked power being used to silence and manipulate critics. Her silence continues, but with each day that passes the pressure builds, the walls close in, and her once uncheckable image cracks further under the weight of public betrayal and legal exposure. The question now is not if her reputation will survive, but whether she herself will face consequences beyond public opinion, because Part 5 is coming, and it's already being shaped by lawyer subpoenas and a truth that refuses to stay buried. This was never just about a lawsuit. This was about power, control, and the lengths one person would go to protect their image and destroy someone who threatened it. Blake Lively walked into the courtroom with the confidence of a woman who believed the world still revolved around her narrative, but she walked out defeated, exposed, and spiraling into a scandal she can no longer spin or silence. The case against Jed Wallace didn't just fall apart, it revealed a blueprint of manipulation, media orchestration, and legal overreach that shocked even her most loyal followers. The judge didn't just dismiss her claims, he dismantled them, and in doing so he shattered the illusion that fame could bend the truth. Now with countersuits on the horizon, investigations ramping up, and former allies abandoning her, the empire she built on charm and control is crumbling before the world's eyes. And what's worse is the silence, her refusal to own her actions, her disappearance from the spotlight. It all speaks volumes, because sometimes the loudest confession comes from those who say nothing at all. The story of Blake Lively's legal crusade will be remembered not for the victory she sought, but for the truth she couldn't hide and the destruction she caused. Trying to bury Ida's, the legal dust settles, and the media frenzy intensifies. The ripple effect of Blake Lively's courtroom collapse has now spread far beyond her inner circle, because this is no longer just about what happened between her and Jed Wallace. This is now a full-scale credibility crisis that is dragging in executives, co-stars, publicists, and even major Hollywood studios, who are all being forced to confront one question: what did they know, and when did they know it? Insiders from a prominent talent agency have confirmed that internal reviews are underway as emails and contracts connected to Blake are being re-examined for possible liability or breach of ethics. One agent described the mood as frantic, noting that if any of their communications reveal complicity in the smear campaign or any role in suppressing exonerating evidence, they could face career-ending consequences. But it's not just the agencies that are scrambling. Producers from 2 of her upcoming film projects have reportedly frozen development, and streaming platforms are now reconsidering their partnerships with her, demanding full transparency before proceeding with any future releases. This marks a dramatic shift from the days when her name alone could guarantee funding, media buzz, and public adoration, because now her name is a liability, a magnet for backlash and potential legal exposure. And the fans have noticed too, because the internet is now flooded with breakdowns of her old interviews, press junkets, and red carpet clips, with users pointing out moments that now seem rehearsed, contradictory, or manipulative. In hindsight, clips once seen as empowering are being reinterpreted as calculated diversions, and quotes that once drew applause are now being held up as evidence of deeper deception. What's unfolding is not just a fall from grace, it's a total reevaluation of her career, her image, and the culture of celebrity that enabled her for so long. Even her closest allies have gone quiet. Social media accounts, once filled with supportive reposts and glowing tributes, are now eerily silent. No one wants to be the last one standing. When the curtain finally falls, and as Jed Wallace prepares for a civil case, insiders claim he's sitting on even more damaging evidence, including leaked communications and private memos that could expose a coordinated effort to silence witnesses and manipulate public sympathy. If that's true, and if those documents are brought to court in Part 6, the fallout could spread even further, possibly implicating people who never thought they'd be dragged into this war, because what began as a defamation suit has now grown into a cultural reckoning. And the deeper everyone digs, the more it becomes clear that the truth was never on her side, and maybe never had been. What happens next could redefine not just the fate of Blake Lively, but the entire power structure of celebrity influence in Hollywood, because Part 6 is no longer about a fallen actress. It is about exposure, accountability, and the question of how many powerful people helped keep her narrative alive despite knowing what was buried underneath. The legal team representing Jed Wallace has now filed a formal discovery request demanding access to private communications contracts and financial transfers linked to Blake's team, and what they are seeking goes far beyond texts and emails. They want access to encrypted group chats, burner phone logs, third-party payment records, and anything that may reveal how far this smear campaign really went. Legal experts have already warned that if these files exist and are found to be authentic, they could open the door to conspiracy charges and multiple civil claims that would name more than just Blake as defendants. And as the legal battlefield grows, the media has now turned its spotlight onto the journalists, influencers, and commentators who repeated her claims without evidence. Some of them are already deleting posts, scrubbing archives, and issuing quiet apologies, but others are lawyering up, fearing they could be subpoenaed or named in future suits, because if they knowingly participated in spreading defamatory content in coordination with her team, they too could be held responsible. Meanwhile, whispers from inside a major streaming service confirm that a high-budget project starring Blake has now been shelved indefinitely, not just because of the legal chaos, but because new internal guidelines prohibit working with talent under active ethical investigation. And just like that, a star who once had the power to greenlight an entire franchise with her name alone is being erased in real time. Deals collapsing, scripts being rewritten, branding campaigns pulled overnight, and what's more devastating for her is the shift in public perception. Fan pages once dedicated to defending her are now archiving receipts or posting legal updates and distancing themselves completely because they don't want to be on the wrong side of history when this story finally hits its peak. Even former castmates and colleagues who once praised her in interviews are now issuing vague statements about truth, accountability, and the importance of due process, and all of it points to one inescapable truth: the tide has turned so violently against Blake that recovery may not be an option anymore. She's no longer the heroine in her own story. She's become the cautionary tale, the face of a fall from grace so public, so humiliating, and so complete that it may take years, if not decades, to recover from, if she ever does, because in Part 7, the next wave is coming, and this time it may be her own words that seal her fate once and for all. Now the most devastating blow yet is looming as insiders confirm that several voice recordings and private messages allegedly from Blake Lively herself are being authenticated for submission into evidence. Recordings that, if verified, can not only prove intent, but also show that she orchestrated multiple facets of the smear campaign against Jed Wallace with full awareness of the consequences. According to a confidential source close to the review team, the audio clips include references to press targets, social media manipulation, and direct instructions to key members of her legal and publicity teams to bury anything that might make Jed look sympathetic. And worse, there are moments where she reportedly mocks the judicial process, laughs at the idea of accountability, and even strategizes how to spin a courtroom loss into a victim narrative for her fans. And these revelations have already sent shockwaves through legal circles, because if the tapes are admissible, they could destroy what little credibility she has left and expose her not just as a participant in a failed lawsuit, but as the architect of a calculated reputational takedown. If these messages are authenticated by forensic analysts and confirmed to be untouched, the judge could reopen certain aspects of the original case or approve motions to fast-track This was never just about a lawsuit. This was about power, control, and the lengths one person would go to protect their image and destroy someone who threatened it. Blake Lively walked into the courtroom with the confidence of a woman who believed the world still revolved around her narrative, but she walked out defeated, exposed, and spiraling into a scandal she can no longer spin or silence. The case against Jed Wallace didn't just fall apart, it revealed a blueprint of manipulation, media orchestration, and legal overreach that shocked even her most loyal followers. The judge didn't just dismiss her claims, he dismantled them, and in doing so, he shattered the illusion that fame could bend the truth. Now, with countersuits on the horizon, investigations ramping up, and former allies abandoning her, the empire she built on charm and control is crumbling before the world's eyes. And what's worse is the silence, her refusal to own her actions, her disappearance from the spotlight. It all speaks volumes, because sometimes the loudest confession comes from those who say nothing at all. The story of Blake Lively's legal crusade will be remembered not for the victory she sought, but for the truth she couldn't hide and the destruction she caused trying to bury it.